Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the KT Canada seminar series. I'm Megan Story. I'm going to be kind of hosting today. I'm really happy to have Dr. Leah Crockett with us from the University of Manitoba. I'm joining from Toronto. I work at the KT program here at Unity Health Toronto. So first I'll just do a quick procedural thing for the question. So if anyone has a question, please put it in the chat. And if you can send it to everyone, that's great, because then everyone can see it and I can read it out during the Q&A. You can also use the raise hand function if you would like to. And that way you can kind of be on camera and say your question out loud, or you can say it out loud and not be on camera, either way. And so we'll have about 40 minutes of presentation, followed by about 20 minutes of Q&A. So as I mentioned, we're really happy to have Dr. Leah Crockett with us today. She is a Banting Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Pediatrics and Child Health at the University of Manitoba, embedded in the research into the enhancement of acute care for children's health, or REACH, team at the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba. Under the mentorship of Dr. Kathryn Sibley, her doctoral work explored the characteristics, processes, dynamics, and effects of research partnerships in child health. Her postdoctoral work focuses on an implementation RCT to enhance pediatric readiness in Manitoba's rural emergency departments, examining contextual, intersectional, and system-level factors that influence implementation effectiveness. And Dr. Crockett is passionate about bridging research, policy, and practice through meaningful research partnerships. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Crockett to take over.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Sorry, that was a bit of a mouthful. And thanks to everyone for joining today. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to present my PhD work today, which I defended back in October. And as Megan mentioned, it was focused on exploring, pardon me, research partnerships in child health. It's not every day that you have the chance to share your doctoral work in this capacity, so I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Oh, and just as a side note, I heard that my slides are a bit fuzzy, so I apologize if anything is difficult to see, but we'll just carry on with that. I have nothing to disclose, but I would like to acknowledge that my doctorate work was funded by several sources, predominantly SCIHR Doctoral Fellowship. And I'm currently supported by a Banting Postdoctoral Fellowship and embedded in the REACH theme at the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba. And the work I'm presenting today was done as a graduate student in the Department of Community Health Sciences at the University of Manitoba. Before beginning, I invite each of you to reflect on the lands which you are currently situated. I would like to respectfully acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from Treaty 1 territory, the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe, Aninishinaabeg, Dakota Ayote, and Dene, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. I also acknowledge Treaty 5 territory in northern Manitoba, where I was born and raised. And as someone with both Métis and settler ancestry, I recognize how these histories intersect in my own identity and the importance of continuing to learn these past and present day realities. In my work, I commit to this ongoing understanding, respect, and accountability to the communities and histories that have shaped who I am, that are embedded in the systems and institutions that we work, and that shape the partnerships that I studied in this research. By the end of the session today, I hope that you will be able to understand the scope and nature of partnered health research, so what it looks like and why it matters, recognize the key factors that affect the success and sustainability of these partnerships, so unpacking the dynamics, so how teams are working together, and the processes, so the strategies and the structures that can sometimes be difficult to capture through quantitative research, and also think about the shared and unique elements of partnering in child health research, what makes it different and what we can learn sort of across various approaches or various populations. So we're witnessing changing tides in health research, driven in part by calls to democratize science, funders seeking more relevant research and return on investment, and the belief that those affected should help shape research and the solutions generated. Research partnerships, where researchers and knowledge users work together throughout the research process, are increasingly practiced and promoted. These partnerships emphasize doing research with people, not to or on them, valuing diverse knowledge, and integrating different perspectives. And while many of you on the call today are likely familiar with KT and IKT, which is great, I will say that for many in health research, this really represents a fundamental shift in how we conduct research and a departure from the biomedical research paradigm, which is dominant in the field. So in child health, these partnerships aim to improve the well-being and health of children and youth. And knowledge users can include a range of people, such as parents, families, communities, healthcare providers, decision makers, and even children and youth themselves. Sometimes this can involve one group, sometimes multiple groups. And in Canada, the momentum for partnered research partly stems from the no-do gap between research generated and its use in practice. One theory for this gap is a knowledge production problem, that essentially researchers are often investigating questions that aren't fully relevant or useful to end users. And in response, funder-driven approaches such as integrated KT and patient engagement have been championed from within health research to encourage and support collaborative research practices. And this has really increased their presence in the health research landscape. But as we all know, partnering in research is not new. It has a long-standing history, particularly in the social sciences, and can go by a number of terms, including community-based participatory research, patient engagement, participatory action research, and IKT. Recently, research partnerships has been advanced as sort of an umbrella term, reflecting the shared similarities across approaches, and also the need for formal crosstalk and learning across disciplines. And I took this broader research partnership framing when conducting this work. It's important to note that while partnerships are growing, partly in an effort to bridge this research practice gap, they do still represent a small proportion of health research overall. Dedicated funding opportunities have helped formalize and legitimize partnership work, but it remains a developing area of research and practice. Furthermore, there's no one-size-fits-all model for partnering, and a number of factors influence if, when, and how partnerships are formed. Partnering also exists on a spectrum, so from the lowest levels of consult, but ideally to the higher levels of collaborate or even knowledge user led. And this level of engagement can fluctuate even within a project based on capacity, knowledge user needs, and interest. And this also makes studying research partnerships, among many other factors, challenging. But why study research partnerships in child health? Well, we know that children aren't just small adults, and several factors make this area especially interesting, at least in my opinion. For example, partnerships often require a dual focus on both children and their broader support networks, including families, caregivers, and communities. And often this can mean interacting either directly or indirectly with a number of different actors. There are also heightened issues around advocacy, dependency, and protection, where decision-making can be more complex. And then there's also sometimes coordination across different sectors, such as health, education, and social services. And just as child healthcare and research are uniquely structured, I hypothesized that partnerships in this space would also have distinct aspects to consider. Despite growing interest in research partnerships, there's still a lack of solid evidence, particularly on why and how we partner. Child health reviews have mostly focused on specific approaches like patient engagement and isolated knowledge user groups such as parents. Primary research studies have often centered on adults and individual projects, leaving gaps in understanding the unique dynamics and processes of child health research partnerships, including at the most basic level, what they look like and how they function. And these gaps set the stage for my doctoral work. Just to position myself, I came to this work with a blend of personal and professional interests. Growing up in northern Manitoba, I was exposed to many community-driven health initiatives. My mom worked in community health development, later moving into leadership and quality improvement roles in the Northern Health region, while my dad worked in rec management. So I was surrounded by values and worldviews that in hindsight shape a lot of my work today. But in 2015, I landed a job in knowledge translation where my interest in KT and research partnerships truly took shape. At the time, as a knowledge broker for a national network in pediatric emergency care, and through other partnership experiences that I had in global health and health policy, I saw firsthand how research can have a real impact, but also how challenging partnered work can be. At this time, I also worked in the KT platform at the George and Fahey Center for Healthcare Innovation, which is Manitoba's SPORE support unit, where we work to develop capacity for KT in the province. And more recently, becoming a mom has added a personal layer to my work. So this dual perspective, both as a researcher and a parent, drives my passion for making research partnerships more effective and meaningful, especially in child health. And a key component of this is advancing the science. With this in mind, my dissertation work took an exploratory approach, and I used a concurrent mixed methods design organized around three main objectives or studies. Given my background in KT, I was drawn to and approach the research from a pragmatic stance. And each study was informed by the concepts outlined by Jull and colleagues for knowledge user engagement, primarily in helping to conceptualize my studies and design my data collection tools used throughout the research process. And my guiding question throughout this work was, is child health a unique context for research partnerships? So now I'm just going to dive into the key findings of each study. So I first conducted a scoping review to look at what was published and reported in this area. And here I intentionally included a wide range of partnership approaches and diverse knowledge user groups. And this allowed me to capture the breadth of partnership practices across fields and provided a comprehensive foundation for what's going on in this area. I followed established scoping review methodology to identify studies where knowledge users were engaged in at least one phase of the research process, and that focused on child health. Our search strategy identified a large number of articles, over 22,000, and ultimately 316 studies were included in the review. The initial search was done in 2019 and then later updated in late 2021. What we found was that most studies engaged multiple knowledge user groups, with children and youth, healthcare providers, and parents and families being the most common. There was an exponential growth in partnered approaches, especially after 2019, with most using a community-based participatory research approach. 75% engaged at the levels of involve or collaborate, indicating moderate to high levels of engagement. And knowledge users were engaged across the research process using a number of different strategies, though it wasn't always clear who was engaged and when. With that said, we found that knowledge users were most often engaged in planning and conducting research and least likely to be engaged in dissemination. Involvement was most often in data collection and developing study design and methods, and maybe not unsurprisingly, least in preparing ethics applications and disseminating to academic audiences. And by far the most common engagement strategy reported was formal meetings, followed by establishing formal working groups. Consistent with the field as a whole, reporting beyond partnership characteristics was limited. Partnership outcomes and impacts were reported in 62% of studies, and most were anecdotal and focused on benefits like more relevant and useful research. However, many outcomes also centered on the relational aspects of partnering, such as increased synergy, trust, and sustainable partnerships. Similarly, challenges were often tied to issues like team conflicts, power imbalances, or difficulties with the research process, though these were rarely reported. And this article has been published in the Journal of Child Healthcare, which you can check out if you would like some more detailed data and insights. And while the scoping review provided this valuable baseline information, it was limited by what was reported. And it also highlighted a critical gap, the deeper dynamics of how partnerships actually function in practice, which couldn't be captured in the literature alone. So this led to my second objective of my study, which was focused on understanding the lived experiences, perspectives, motivations, and dynamics of partnering in child health research. So essentially, this phase set out to explore the why people chose to partner in child health research, and the how these partnerships actually work, including the challenges, opportunities that arise in practice. This study was guided by an interpretive description approach and used semi-structured interviews with Canadian child health researchers and knowledge users. I used an inductive thematic approach informed by interpretive description approaches, as I mentioned. So that included things like data immersion, constant comparison, and ongoing interpretation and reflection. And a knowledge user was involved in helping to code and interpret the data. I conducted 15 interviews, including 12 researchers and 3 knowledge users across 6 Canadian provinces. Most participants were female, and the researchers were primarily in mid to late career stages. However, this distinction wasn't always clear-cut. While I initially categorized participants as researchers and knowledge users, a third perspective was evident. Approximately half of the researchers that I spoke with wore the hats of both a researcher and knowledge user, allowing them to straddle academic and healthcare or community environments. So, for example, this could include a researcher who still also worked clinically. In my study, I called them duals because they really did carry both the perspectives and responsibilities of both sides. For these duals, partnering wasn't just an approach, it was really ingrained in their work. And duals had unique experiences that were reflected in their motivation for partnering, how they worked together, and also their willingness to speak about some of the challenges that they encountered. And this dual perspective offered both advantages, so for example, forming research teams, but it also introduced challenges like navigating conflicting expectations. And for example, one described how a research project was done in a way that challenged their integrity within the community. One of the most interesting findings was that people were motivated by different things and that this was often tied to their role. So researchers genuinely believed in partnerships' potential to create meaningful change and produce relevant, impactful research. They felt that partnerships gave them new ways of seeing the world and of making a difference. On the other hand, knowledge users saw partnerships as an opportunity to boost credibility and advocacy efforts, and they appreciated the cross-learning that partnerships offered, as well as the more human approach it fostered. They valued that it wasn't just about winning a grant. For duals, partnering was ingrained in their work, and it was often deemed a practical necessity. Their primary motivation was to improve practical relevance and health outcomes. And because they already straddled both academic and healthcare settings, their motivation was centered on bridging those worlds to make research more applicable and actionable. But despite progress made, such as increasing involvement of knowledge users in the research process, researchers spoke of the tensions of doing partnership work in systems and structures that are not necessarily always conducive to partnering. For example, especially when it comes to recognizing partnership work in tenure and promotion. Researchers also mention bureaucratic hurdles where tasks like reimbursing partners can be unnecessarily complicated. Although researchers found ways to manage, it often required significant effort, negotiation, and uphill battles to balance academic expectations with the demands of true partnerships. Third, we often hear that relationships are crucial in research partnerships, but participants really drove this home. What became clear was that successful partnering wasn't about the technical aspects, it was really about the quality of relationships. As one participant put it, there has to be some chemistry there, and partnering required things like parking your ego, mutual respect, and reciprocity. These relationships weren't incidental, but required ongoing and deliberate effort. Sharing power was discussed as something that's highly important, but also really tricky to navigate in practice, especially when bringing together groups where there's a natural hierarchy. As one dual put it, I think we have to be so careful about this, the sharing power piece. Like, what does it really mean? How do we define that? In reality, I hold the money typically, so we can't say that we don't hold more power because we do as the researchers. And many improved at this over time through trial and error. Participants didn't shy away from talking about challenges, which were seen as a natural part of bringing people together. Some of these were even seen as productive as long as those strong relationships were already there. So for example, one participant shared how a difficult situation actually strengthened their team by opening up conversations that should have happened a long time ago. So this study makes several contributions to the literature that are not necessarily specific to child health. It provides insights into the different motivations for partnership work and reinforces the importance of relationships. So understanding what drives researchers and knowledge users can help us tailor our communication strategies and align expectations. Second, it highlights ongoing challenges within academic systems and calls for continued change, not just from institutions, but also from researchers to continue to champion these efforts. Additionally, it begins to unpack the dual role, which I would love to explore further in future research. And while this role is not necessarily new, so for example, sometimes it's referred to terms like boundary spanners, embedded researchers, I would argue that it remains underexplored in partnered research. For objective 3, I still needed to dive deeper into what might make child health a unique context for research partnerships. And I did so through a mixed method study of Canadian researchers and knowledge users' perceptions and perspectives. The quantitative phase involved a secondary analysis of a cross-sectional survey of Canadian research partnerships funded between 2011 and 2019. And this survey was designed by my supervisor, Dr. Kathryn Sibley, and included a large subset of provincially and federally funded partnership projects that had identified knowledge users named as co-applicants on the grant. The qualitative phase used a subset of interview data from the previous study, which I analyzed through qualitative description. I then integrated the findings in the discussion to better understand the potential needs, challenges, and effects of partnering in child health. So this study established a large cohort of funded partnered child health research. Of the 589 survey respondents included in the analysis, approximately 1/5 were identified as a child health project. And the remaining 80% are what I referred to as the general health cohort. Most child health survey respondents were team researchers, women in mid to late career stages, and most had engaged in 7 or more partnerships at the time of funding. At the project level, we identified 78 unique child health projects. Most, 70%, were federally funded, and 81% had a required partnership component. While project characteristics like length and funding amount were similar to the general health cohort, child health projects differed in their focus, with the largest proportion being in the social and population health research pillar. And notably, none were under the biomedical research pillar. When comparing survey cohorts, I found no significant differences between the child and general health cohorts, suggesting similar skills, resources, and supports. Child health researchers reported feeling highly capable and motivated to partner. However, the specific effects of these projects, like the impact on health system policies, were mixed, reflecting the challenges of achieving this level of impact at the project level. Interestingly, 100% of respondents strongly agreed that engaging in research partnerships held value. And while this may not be reflected in the specific project outcomes, it suggests that the benefits of partnering extend beyond some of these measurable impacts. While we found no differences in the survey, the qualitative portion of the study really let me dive a little bit deeper. So the interview participants acknowledged shared elements in partnering. For example, this one person says, well, I don't know that there are major differences. I think the principles of respect and full involvement apply equally. But they also impact some distinct challenges and considerations. First, partnerships in child health were thought to be more logistically complex, including additional permissions and maintaining consistent engagement as children and families age out of partnerships. There were also mixed perceptions on directly engaging with children and youth. Some saw things like age and capability as barriers, while others really emphasized the value of including their voices. Some recounted stories of the value of their unique insights and examples of kids often bringing up things that adults had completely missed. But as a result, engaging proxies like parents or caregivers was a much more common approach. But this came with its own set of complexities, especially when deciding who to engage and also when working across multiple sectors. And even though there was some uncertainty about directly engaging children and youth, it was clear that the unique aspects of partnering really came from directly working with this population. Participants talked about key considerations that need to be made, like safeguarding vulnerable groups, understanding generational dynamics. As this one person mentions, it's being open to our older ways of understanding to be completely flipped upside down. And also making sure that engagement strategies were developmentally appropriate. They also pointed out some distinct effects of partnering in child health, things like empowerment, skill development, and shifting social narratives, and sometimes faster decision making. Oh, my slides will not let me advance here. Or I'll just give it a minute. Oh, there we go. Okay. So as I integrated the quantitative and qualitative aspects of this study, it was clear that while child health partnerships do share a lot of similarities with partnerships in other areas of health, they do also face unique challenges, especially when it comes to the processes of engagement and also when engaging specific populations. These challenges tended to fall into three broad categories: logistical, practical, and conceptual. And things like additional permissions, ethical considerations, and navigating different systems all add layers of complexity. But interestingly, at a broader level, my findings suggest that individual factors like working in a supportive research environment or having a genuine belief in the value of partnering can actually help offset some of these challenges. In other words, while the context may present barriers, personal motivation and institutional support seem to play a big role in keeping partnerships effective and impactful. Furthermore, pairing quantitative and qualitative methods in this study reinforced the importance of going beyond surface level comparisons. So while the survey didn't show major differences between child and general health cohorts, the qualitative data helped uncover the deeper context-specific considerations that shape how partnerships function. So this study makes several important contributions. First, it assembled the largest cohort of partnered child health research projects to date, providing a solid foundation for understanding the landscape of these partnerships. It's also the first study to compare child health partnerships with those in other health contexts. It identifies unique challenges specific to partnering in child health, and it also advances our understanding of partnership dynamics, processes, and effects. So collectively, as I revisited my guiding question, is child health a unique context for research partnerships? What started out with as a seemingly simple question turned out to be not a so simple answer. While these partnerships share common elements and challenges with other areas of research, such as the importance of relationship building and the need to navigate academic systems, they do require a different set of commitments and qualities. For example, engaging with children, youth, and their families involves distinct considerations that demand heightened sensitivity, creativity, and empathy. Partnership dynamics and processes can be more complex, often involving proxies like parents and requiring strategies that are tailored to various developmental stages, or sometimes even across generations. So while child health partnerships aren't entirely unique, they do require a thoughtful, context-specific approach that addresses the unique needs of children and their families, and one that is highly dependent on the characteristics of the partnership itself. So as I thought about the implications of this research, I broke down the findings into 5 areas, highlighting what I found to be the common overarching similarities and differences. And I'll just quickly walk through these one by one. So first, child health research partnerships are becoming increasingly important, reflecting a broader global shift towards inclusive and participatory research practices. These studies show both an increase in volume as well as increasing and evolving capabilities to partner. Across the 3 studies, I observed a clear upward trend in the use of research partnerships, spanning geographical regions and disciplines, but particularly in North America, Australia, and the UK. In particular, approaches like community-based participatory research and patient engagement were most often used, aligning with the focus of existing child health reviews. Another trend that was evident was the increasing involvement of children and youth. And given that this is where some of the most clear distinctions were found, it's important that we continue to document and share these learnings to ensure that partnerships remain effective and impactful. Second, one unique aspect that was subtly woven throughout my findings was the concept of a relational web, which emphasizes the interconnected networks that surrounds the child. And this mirrors the broader idea of relationality from Indigenous scholarship, where individuals, families, and communities are deeply interwoven. In child health, this web can span generations, sectors, and disciplines, adding both complexity but also richness to the partnerships. And considering this relational web adds value to our understanding of partnership dynamics, which are often expanded for practical and protective reasons. For example, 75% of partnerships in study 1 involved more than one knowledge user group. So for example, often engaging both children and adults simultaneously, though the reasons for this expansion and how these dynamics were managed was not always clear. This complexity highlights the need to consider several realities like negotiating with gatekeepers, and balancing ethical considerations such as child privacy and parental involvement. And these dynamics require adaptable approaches to ensure effective collaboration across multiple relational layers. And it also requires thinking about things like whose voice is being heard and prioritized, and how are the intergenerational power dynamics being managed. Third, partnerships that involve children and youth require approaches that are tailored to their unique needs. This means considering not just the ethical issues, but also the practical needs of children and the evolving role of parents or caregivers as children's level of autonomy evolves. As children grow and become more independent, the ways that we engage them in research need to change too. And these developmental stages add complexity to partnering, requiring adaptable and flexible strategies to ensure effective engagement at each stage of development. So as one participant put it, meet them where they're at and get down on the floor with them. Fourth, while child health partnerships share core principles with other research areas like trust, reciprocity, and power sharing, the way that these principles are applied sometimes does need to be adapted for the child health context. For instance, if engaging with children and youth, trust building isn't just about connecting with the children, but also with their caregivers who play a crucial role in facilitating their involvement. The approach needs to be thoughtfully adjusted to respect the unique needs of children and their families, ensuring that these principles are not just applied, but truly meaningful in the context of child health. And finally, research partnerships in child health face common challenges in measuring impact. But despite these challenges, the studies show that these partnerships do offer a wide range of benefits. The complementary methods used across the various studies that I just presented strengthen the findings, and while measuring the effects is complex, understanding these effects is key to improving partnership practices and ensuring accountability and ongoing support for research partnerships within our academic and funding systems. As with all research, there are strengths and limitations to this work. One of the strengths is the comprehensive approach. So I used multiple methods and perspectives to offer a well-rounded understanding. However, I acknowledge limited knowledge user involvement within my studies. Additionally, the guiding question could be seen as reductionist, given that both child health and research partnerships are not homogeneous topics. Finally, the broad focus, while a necessary first step given the state of the field, does limit its practical implications. There are several implications from this work. On the practice side, the findings may provide insights for institutions, funders, and partnership teams on the ongoing need to address tensions between academic systems, or structures and processes. And it provides insights to partnership teams on potential challenges they might encounter and strategies used to overcome them. It also, more importantly, sheds light on who is engaged in partnered child health research, when, and with what strategies. On the science side, it advances our understanding of a previously fragmented topic area. So it considers the scope of partnership approaches and the range of knowledge users that might be engaged. It suggests that tailored guidance might be most needed for partnerships engaging children and youth, but ultimately this research lays the foundation for future scholarly work in this area and introduces several new research questions. So to wrap up, our understanding of partnered child health research continues to evolve and has many layers. These partnerships require flexibility and a context-sensitive approach given their shared and unique aspects. Partnerships in child health are incredibly diverse, and there's no one right way to partner. By staying adaptable, working together in meaningful and respectful partnerships, and better documenting and sharing how we partner, we can continue to refine and improve the way we work together in child health research. There are others involved in this work who I'd like to thank, in particular, my supervisor, Dr. Kathryn Sibley, for her invaluable support during my doctorate training. I also had a fabulous PhD committee and extend a special thanks to Drs. Michelle Dreger and Shannon Scott, and of course, knowledge user partner, Kent Lofgard, who worked with me throughout some of these studies. And then finally, I acknowledge my current funding from CIHR and my role with the research into the enhancement of acute care for children's health theme at the Children's Hospital Research Institute of Manitoba for allowing me the time this morning to come talk to you about my PhD work.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leah. So we're open for questions. Just gonna take a look at the chat here. That was super interesting. Thank you so much. So while people are thinking about their questions, I got a couple here ready. Oh, and I'm also gonna put the link for the evaluation in the chat, just in case people need to hop off, but I will also send it by email for anybody who misses it. All right, let me see here. So you talked about a lot of benefits of partnering. Do you think there are any risks of partnering?
Great question. And this discussion has evolved over the years. In the literature, it was sort of first framed as a risk to researchers or to the data quality. So there's a great paper on the dark side of co-production. Well, some others have pushed back on this. Another great paper, for example, is on who's casting those shadows. I actually personally see the risks to knowledge users as being far more substantial. So partnerships can sometimes be superficial without genuine involvement or influence on the research process. There's the risk of culturally unsafe practices or risks to parents and families. Or then also risks of negative results. What to do if findings reflect poorly on an organization, things like that. But I really think that the benefits to researchers outweigh any potential risks. So I guess a long answer to that. I think there are more benefits than risks, and that the risks are more on the side of the knowledge users if meaningful partnerships and care in partnering isn't had.
Thank you. Okay, so question from Jessica in the chat. Where do you see parent partnerships being the most impactful, and how do we avoid feelings of tokenism?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really about working together and seeing what's most meaningful for them and what ways they would like to contribute. So sort of leveraging both areas of expertise and seeing how you can work together for benefits to both parents and to the research project. I'm not sure if I answered that, but
let's see. What do you think are the implications of grouping different partnership approaches together? And is there a specific one you'd recommend for child health? Oh, sorry. Do you want to let Sarah go first? Let Sarah go first. Sarah, go ahead, please.
Well done. It was wonderful to sit and listen. You did a lot of amazing work. I'm curious a bit about some of your interactions with individuals in this work, and just specifically around communication. So two of my children are non-speaking, and in our work, when we talk about being involved in research, sometimes that's a limitation as well when we're engaging with children and youth and individuals with lived and living experience, if they are using forms of communication that are maybe less familiar for the research partners. And I'm curious if any of that came up in your conversation and your investigation around the speaking and non-speaking forms of communication, how that might impact a partnership.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm trying to think back. So when speaking with researchers and knowledge users, for example, I don't think any were necessarily specific in those areas, unfortunately. Um, I would have to look back at the scoping review a little bit more. I'm sure there are some studies in this area that might have some insight, but none are sort of popping to mind. But that's definitely an important area to think about, and that really speaks to the need to tailor and adapt strategies depending on which populations you're working with and depending on their specific needs.
So I'm gonna go back to my question unless someone has anything else they want to jump in with at the moment. Oh, sorry, Shannon, did you want to say something? Yeah.
I just had a couple of things I was interested. I'm Shannon Grant, formerly of Mount St. Vincent University, recently made the jump to non-for-profit at Heart and Stroke. So I'm here representing myself, not Heart and Stroke, but I'm wondering if you could comment a bit more on, there's 2 points that really struck a chord with me based on my research. One was, especially in the Indigenous research and programming I've been engaged in, the feedback you got in terms of barriers, maybe unknowingly, knowingly, caused by policies and procedures within the academy, and how that kind of lends to systemic racism and all kinds of other things. What were your thoughts on, like, potentially future collaborations in research that people could do to address that? And similarly, the impact piece really is of interest to me, because I commonly hear people, you know, with integrated KT, I know we're supposed to be planning for that from the ground up, but then, we come to the end of the grant, and then, the amount of time we have might not lend to the types of impacts we hoped we would have. So they're the two kind of areas that really, I think, are really important pieces of your work. And I'd love you to comment on the more, think about maybe some future research, maybe, or collaborations we could do. Not me and you necessarily, but like all of us. And yeah, I think you have the vibe of what I'm going for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was promising to hear some of the evolutions. And again, some of the interviews were conducted back in 2021. So my hope is that things have continued to evolve since that time. But there had been some evolutions in the systems and structures in helping to recognize and formalize partnership work in the academy. But there were definitely still some challenges, and those take a long time to work through and to continue to support. In terms of impact, yeah, that's the $1 million question in an area that is definitely still evolving, and really it involves defining those impact domains up front. So thinking about what the goals are that you hope to achieve and how you can measure that. In another sense, it also, I think, speaks to the importance of documenting the processes, because that's another thing that's sometimes the processes or the dynamics of working together and forming those relationships are both a process, but they're also an outcome of your research. So documenting sort of some of those key changes that occur throughout the research process that you might think you might remember, but then you get to the end of the project and you might forget all those specific changes that were made in how maybe they helped to change the research questions or helped to influence data interpretation, those kind of things. But yeah, that's a tricky one. It often takes time, and it's often spread across multiple projects depending on the relationships involved. So when you're looking at specific publications, sometimes it's hard to pull out some of those broader impacts that might occur over time. And then just another point on that, that sometimes it's hard to untangle impacts, whether they're due to the research or they're due to the healthcare or political environment that you're working in, or the engagement itself. So lots of times those are quite entangled, and it's hard to sort of pull out what the outcomes and impacts are based on, specifically on the engagement or on those other factors, or if it's kind of all of it combined. And I would say that the evidence, though it's advancing, is not quite there yet.
That was
Thank
awesome, Leah. Congratulations on a beautiful PhD.
Well, thank you very much.
Anyone else want to jump in? I have a couple more questions. We'll float it up here, but I'm happy to have someone else ask. Okay, so what I was asking about earlier, what do you think are implications of grouping different partnership approaches together? And is there a specific one you would recommend for child health?
Yeah, there's definitely value in shared learning and mutual understanding across approaches. And we know, based on some recent publications, for example, that these approaches do share more similarities than differences, and that their overarching goal is the same. Likewise, we know that researchers find it difficult to align with a single approach. So for example, even in our survey, oftentimes researchers or people filling it out checked off more than one approach. And then even within the interviews, sometimes even just the way it was brought up, individuals would say things like IKT or applied research or whatever you want to call it. So I think there's definitely shared learning or opportunities with shared learning across approaches. And for me, it was really valuable to sort of drop, I don't want to say drop the labels, but to just consider the learnings across all of these different approaches. So I think there was value in that for sure. In terms of a specific approach for child health, no, I don't think I would recommend a specific approach per se. I think it depends on the nature and the goals of the partnership. So one could consider kind of what is their primary motivation and go from there. So for example, if it's to increase knowledge use or application, that lends itself well to IKT. Empowerment, things like that often lend themselves to CBPR, but that's not to say that each approach isn't relevant to the other. So in the end, I don't think the specific approach matters. It's more about articulating and reporting on sort of why you chose it and how you use that approach.
Thank you. I wanted to also ask a question. This came in, someone included it in their registration. And they asked, how can we best measure the impact? I guess you have talked about impact a little bit already, but they asked, how can we best measure the impact of child and youth engagement in pediatric research, i.e. how the study improved from their input? And they said as separate from evaluations of the PPI experience. I'm not sure exactly what PPI is. Maybe you do.
Yeah, so that would be patient and public involvement.
Okay.
It's another term for yeah, so I answered that a little bit.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, sort of clearly thinking about those goals up front and maybe planning for those outcome measures from the start. As I mentioned, sort of tracking some of those processes and changes that might occur throughout. Some other ways that I guess I could think of are maybe some reflexive researcher logs throughout the process. So again, kind of like things like documenting instances where engagement influenced decision-making, how and why. And then especially important would be reporting on that if possible to help share those findings and to grow the evidence base. Some ways that we did in our studies, again, were stakeholder perceptions. So sort of maybe going a little bit beyond experiences, but perceptions on to what extent do you believe this influenced health system decision making, for example. And there are limitations to that, of course, but it also provides valuable information. And then I guess just finally, using mixed methods, I think, is really valuable. Stories can be very powerful in demonstrating impacts or outcomes. So that's just another way.
So that actually, I have one more question. And that leads into that one nicely. I was going to ask you about the benefits of using mixed methods to look at research partnerships.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely very valuable. Both have their strengths and limitations, and I think combining them is a really powerful way, particularly to study research partnerships. Some of those things like the processes of working together and the dynamics that occur in partnerships can be really hard to get at with quantitative methods. And that's where sort of some of those stories really help to unpack some of that. Whereas some of the quantitative methods really helped to understand sort of who is being engaged, how are they being engaged. So yeah, having both those sides really helped to add depth and breadth to the research that I was able to do.
Well, thank you so much. We do have time for one more question if anyone has a question they want to add. But yeah, I want to thank everyone again for attending, and thank you so much to Dr. Crockett for this presentation. I thought it was super interesting. Our next webinar will be in a month on March 13th with David Campbell from University of Calgary, and he'll be talking about his work to improve diabetes care for people experiencing poverty and homelessness. So hopefully you will join us for that. And one final plug for me is we're still taking applications for a few more days until Monday for the Summer Institute, KT Canada Summer Institute, which will take place in June, and it's happening in Vancouver. So if anyone's interested, you can check our website, or you can always email me about that. There's a really nice comment in the chat for you from Sarah, so make sure you see that. Leah. Yeah, so thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thank you, Leah. Take care.
Thank you. I'm just going to read the commentary.
Yeah. I won't close it up for a few minutes.
Great. I read it. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Bye. See you.